Hi, everyone, and thanks, Peter. It is great to be here and to have the distinct honor and pleasure of moderating a discussion with Jeff Boyd, who is the author of The Weight, which is an absolutely fantastic book. And we have a full lineup of questions to dive in on. And so to get started, I would just offer up a few lines of bio for Jeff. Jeff Boyd is a former public school teacher from Chicago and a recent graduate of the Iowa's Writers Workshop, where he received the Deena Davidson Friedman Prize for fiction. He currently lives in Brooklyn, New York, with his partner and daughter. I just thought what I'd do first is just offer a little bit of a perspective on reflections on the book, having finished it recently. And I have to say, I just thoroughly enjoyed it. As an emerging writer, I found so inspiring Jeff's ability to take this incredibly complex theme of emotional isolation, wrapped up in race, class, religion, and to render it in such a compelling, disarming, authentic, poignant, decidedly human way. And his character struggle with the lies we tell ourselves, but the book allows us to see the power and transcendence of truth. So it was a really extraordinary reading experience for me. Jeff, welcome. Before diving in, how does it feel to be on the other side of publishing your debut novel?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Torrence. The other end feels good. It's took a long time. It's almost, it's almost not unbelievable, but I guess it's so wrapped up in the journey that it's almost had to stop and kind of think about it sometimes. Like, oh yeah, I did publish a book. It exists. It's out in the world. Um, yeah. But
Excellent. Well, we're going to get into a lot of detail around that process. What I thought I'd do first is to just read the excerpt from the publisher, Simon & Schuster, as context for those who might not be familiar with the book or haven't had a chance to read it yet. So here's the excerpt from the publisher. Julian Strickland is seemingly the lone Black man in the hipster dreamland of Portland, Oregon. To his friends, he's the coolest member of the scene, the soulful drummer from Chicago in an indie rock band that's just about to break through. But to himself, he's a sheltered Christian homeschool kid who used to write book reports on Leviticus, a virgin until the night of his marriage, divorced at 24. He's still in disarray 2 years later, pretending to fit in, wondering if any of his relationships are real, estranged from his family, and struggling to reconcile his relationship with God. Then he meets Ida Blair, a Black painter at the start of a promising career. They begin a tentative relationship, and Ida seems to offer Julian relief from his confusion. But suddenly, she stops responding to his texts. Things only get worse when Julian's best friend mysteriously turns on him, his house burns down, and the band considers breaking up on the eve of their most important show yet. It seems the only thing Julian has left, the only thing he's ever had really, is the weight he is carrying. Jeff Boyd's beguiling first novel is a piercing exploration of faith, racial identity, love, and friendship, woven of acid humor, disarming vulnerability, and unforgettable poignance. So, Jeff, just to start, you begin the book with two quotes. The first is from Article 1, Section 35 of the Oregon Constitution in 1857, which actually institutionalized the exclusion of free Blacks, termed Negroes and mulattoes in the statute, from actually entering the state. So that's the first quote. The second is from Muriel Rukeyser's The Speed of Darkness, and poses the question, who will speak these days, if not I, if not you? So what motivated you to start with these pretty powerful backdrops?
yeah. Well, I think I've always, in writing the book, I've always thought of Portland as an important setting that's can't be divorced from what happens within the novel. I lived there for about uh, 10 years, 11 years of my 20s. And it was a very kind of, it still is a very kind of homogenous white place. And I guess I always had that feeling like, well, why is this, And I guess I started coming to the idea that it was through like reading up the history and everything, that it was kind of by design. The Constitution of Oregon said that blacks couldn't be there past sundown, pretty much. There's like sundown towns, but Oregon was like a sundown state. It was like black people shouldn't be here at all, especially so. And the same thing I think is in relation to like the law. I think the last law. I mean, people stopped following it, but the last law that kind of prohibited black people living in certain parts of Portland wasn't struck down until the '60s.
Mm.
And so it's a very white place by design. There's even the more historical black neighborhoods there, which are not many, I think it's two, aren't very historical because people haven't had very much chance to kind of set root there. And so I thought about the fact that Julian in the book is kind of working against this backdrop. And also has that the law is also, specifically in some ways to white people, right? It's telling white people like you can't, if you do get caught harboring these black people, if you do get caught, cavorting with them or giving them work, then you are in essence kind of under the same. Hey, you're not following the law either. So those people are also in danger. And
Mm.
so I kind of thought about how there's this black character Julian who's mostly around white people in this white world, and how those white people, to an extent, also I think get the feeling sometimes that they're doing something historically significant by having a close black close black person in their orbit, because it is kind of rare in that sense. So I thought it was a backdrop that I feel like couldn't be divorced from the modern day Portland that he
Mm.
finds himself in. And yeah, and as far as the Rukeyser quote, let's say who. Sorry, I'm reading it. Who will speak these days, if not I, if not you? Um, there was a I like to read poetry. I feel like I'm kind of like a failed poet. My undergrad days, I was a poetry major, um, and so I think when I'm stuck writing or when I don't know where to go next, I often read poetry as a way to kind of open up something, in my writing brain. Um,
Mm.
and I remember reading this poem. So at some point while I was writing this book, and the poem is kind of, I get the while reading the poem, it's kind of about this time in her life. You get this idea she's talking about a time in her life that was kind of more simple. The time in her life, I think she's like refers to like a roof. She's like describing things, and it's also about male female relationships and that kind of thing. But in the end, it's when she says, "Who will speak these days is not I, if not you." That kind of spoke to me because I thought about the life that I had lived in Portland in my 20s. I thought about the friends that I have, um, the community that I was in, and how in many ways I haven't read a book that had that kind of community in it.
Mm.
Um, and the same thing with Julian being like a black protagonist. I hadn't read a book really that had this central black character who had a lot of white friends in this kind of indie rock world. And so I thought, okay, like this is something that I know about, and so not that I haven't seen. And also, I thought, I guess I was never naive enough when I was writing the book to think that almost anyone would ever read it. Like it was just like so. In a lot of ways, I was writing it for myself, but I was also writing it for my friends. Um, for the people I knew who would be able to read this and say, "Oh yeah, like I remember that," and also to the broader extent of I think anyone who's been kind of aloof and in their 20s and kind of searching and wondering. I thought, okay, like this, ideally and hopefully, no matter where someone's background is, if they've ever been that kind of person, they will also see that this book is kind of hopefully kind of reflecting those feelings that they would have as well, those struggles or those kind of joys that we think a lot of us have felt in our 20s. Um, so
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I think that is one of the things that really resonated with me reading it was this sense of that kind of world not really being revealed in literature. And it's a world that I've spent a lot of time in as well. It's a world that a lot of Black people spend time in because just as a minority in general. So to give voice to that, I thought was really fantastic and quite compelling. And in addition to those sort of backdrops, I mean, there are a number of strong themes at play as the story unfolds. I mean, the obvious ones of race and class and religion, but there's also just this really rich emotional terrain. So I'm thinking about the sense of isolation, loneliness, depression. And there are a number of defenses, right, that are at play with the protagonist, like it's kind of acerbic, ironic humor, which, by the way, I enjoyed so much. I had a number of laugh out loud moments, which was really entertaining and fulfilling to read. But there are also like the defenses of drugs and alcohol and sex. So you have all of these emotional dynamics that are certainly wrapped up in the more macro societal themes, but there's kind of a universal tenor to your exploration of character, one that actually transcends race and class and religion to the point of a broader commentary on, like you said, the challenges of our 20s, you know, this kind of emotional malaise that we experience at that time of our lives. And actually, what's interesting is that that extends to Julian's circle of white friends as well. It's not just the Black thing, right? So, what do you hope people will take away from the novel? What do you want them to learn, experience, change their minds about?
Yeah. Um, well, I think it's I'll try to unpack that, I guess, a little bit. As far as what I want them to, as far as taking it away, I think when I thought about Julian, also he is like this, white character living in this sort of, or sorry, Black character living in a sort of kind of white, kind of a little bit of an elite liberal bubble. And he's around, he has friends who also um, struggle with a lot of the same questions that he has, but from a different angle, right? So he's coming from Chicago, moving to Portland, to kind of in search of himself. He's kind of had a kind of a falling out with his religion. He's divorced. He's kind of has some trouble with his parents, kind of a prodigal son kind of situation. Coming into a place where other people sort of feel like a prodigal child in some
Mhm.
ways, and I think I guess my own thought, there's this um, like I feel like there's this room for like this kind of upper middle class or middle class kind of white person to explore their life, to make mistakes, to do things maybe that society would say is bad, to be slightly kind of maybe bankrolled by their parents, in this kind of search for something greater, right? Because they've seen what their parents have, they've seen what the world requires of them, and they're kind of like, I don't know if I really want to do that or not. And I also feel like for Julian, he doesn't have that cushion, but he does have some of those same questions, and he has that same. I think he wants the same room to to make mistakes and to be kind of messy with who he is. He wants to dedicate his life to music, like his music is his thing, and then his job is just to get by. Um, but he doesn't have that same kind of cushion that a lot of his friends have, and so that's kind of the rift I feel like I've felt between those that difference. Even if it's not about race, it's about how culture. Saying the same thing as the Constitution. It's about how culture and society has kind of let people um, it gives certain people room to really explore who they are, and other people room to like be like, oh, get a job. It's like you're a 25-year-old Black guy, you just want to play music. Like, yeah, right. Like you should be focused on your career and everything else. And that makes sense. He probably, to some extent, he probably should, but he's kind of fallen in with these other people who also are like, no, like you're right. Like it doesn't mean like money doesn't really mean anything. Um, Duty to family isn't the most important thing. It's about like who we are now and what we want out of life. And so I kind of wanted to give Julian this chance to kind of be a searcher, like his friends are searchers. And I thought that was kind of real to the Black experience, also that I understand. I feel like isn't really relayed enough. You say, oh, this guy's doing drugs, he's drunk. He's uh, you get a different idea about what a Black man is being that way than you do so a bunch of white kids doing the same thing.
Right, right, sure, of course.
Whether it's even the police or anyone else, they're just like you start, people have these assumptions that they've kind of built in this bias. And so I kind of wanted to give Julian, the character in the book, this openness to really be kind of messy and to try to explore and to be an artist, um, much like the people in the book. And I think it also relates to kind of the experience that I've had. So as far as, like I know a lot of people were like me in their 20s, and I ended up, I guess, being a writer and teaching. Some of those people ended up getting into marketing. Some of those people ended up, still playing music. But we all kind of, there's this kind of childlike search or dissatisfaction, I think, with the way the world is and wanting there to be more to the world than what we see, and then how we can go about making that change. And I think that's the nice part, is that some of those people, who the archetypes maybe in some ways, in the book, or at least the society, like those same people that I know, I feel like have, no matter what they're doing in life, are still that have that searching question. They're still, that spark isn't going to go away, even though they have a job or kids or a 9 to 5. They still have something in them that says, no, like I want more. Like I do believe that there's something more to this life that I can find. And maybe hopefully they're not as destructive about it, because I think that's kind of why I think about the drugs and the alcohol and the sex. Is kind of like it's kind of a balm, not a
Right.
healthy one, but a balm for the struggle and the pain that people feel, and the emptiness that they feel. And so it's how can we go about filling this emptiness in our own kind of natural, genuine way? And how can we kind of give other people the grace to see that when they're struggling or going through something, that it's much more complex than maybe we think. And so I kind of wanted Julian, I have a lot of, I've been to a lot of places where I've been the only Black person. I went to a show recently where I was like in Brooklyn Steel. I looked around and I was like, oh, like once again, I'm the only Black man here. And I always get this feeling that people look at me and they say, what's this guy doing here? Like, what's he about? And I think it's also kind of the spark for the book, as I said, okay, like I'll show them what this person is about. And they may not love it, but this is what, you know, 26-year-old Black man in a situation might be going through. Um, and so I think I want people to come away feeling more empathetic towards people, to um, understand, maybe to cherish their friendships, because I do think friendship's important in this book, and I've always cherished my friendships that I've had, and I feel like I wanted to explore that in the book too, like how far can people go? Um, what will you allow someone to do and still call them your friend? How, working through things like that. Um, so I don't know. I guess hopefully does that answer some of it, I guess.
That's exactly, no, I think that's really thoughtful. I mean, what I took away from the book too is that the relationships, those friendships are, I mean, they're a source of tension and a lot of difficulty, but also particularly toward the end, I mean, they're the source of salvation in a lot of ways. I mean, in a sense of possibility, and there's kind of I think a positive, open-ended quality to the way you render those relationships, that makes it, that is what the book in a lot of ways becomes about, beyond these broader themes of, class and race and religion. So no, that's super helpful. And I think it's actually related to the next question, because based on the acknowledgments at the end of the novel, you actually share a number of experiences with your protagonist, Julian. And I just thought it would be perhaps interesting for those listening in, for you to give some context on your creative process, how you decided what to weave in versus exclude from your lived experience. Did you harbor any fears or anxieties in revealing things through Julian that some might ascribe to you personally? Sort of, I think that's what we all grapple with a bit,
Yeah.
particularly in that first novel. So how did you manage all of that?
Um, it's a good question. It kind of came in spurts, I feel like, right? So when I first started the book, I feel like I had to ask myself, okay, what do I know? What kind of situations have I been in? Um, and so the base of it, I do, Julian, okay, so I homeschooled, like Julian in the book homeschooled. I grew up in a pretty, kind of religious household, conservative religious household. Um, um, I played music. but he plays the drums and I played the bass, so I don't really know how to play the drums. I had to like ask a few drummer friends to like read over it, be like, "Is this right? Is this right?" I tried to give him things that I wouldn't necessarily say or do. And the more I got into the book, the easier that got. So I do think that there's a lot of the characters have aspects of people I know and friendships that I've had and background. Um, but it's almost like sometimes I feel like I would be like, okay, like this friend of mine has this nose, but what if I put it on this face? And I gave them glasses, and they love the thing that I know this person actually hates. So I kind of, especially the first draft, I feel like I did that a lot. And then it just got to a point where the characters like just didn't feel like people I knew at all. I mean, except for within the book, they were like, okay, this is William, this is Richmond. Richmond might be a mashup of six people I know, but eventually he just became Richmond. And so I think sometimes I just worked at it enough. Um, and I knew that people might think, like, for instance, there's like Julian in the book has a sister. I don't have a sister. I have four brothers, but I've had people ask me like, oh, how's your sister doing? I'm like, my sister, because they read the book. They're like, yeah, your sister. It's like, your dad, is he still a cop? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, one of my friends met my dad, and he was like, oh, he's a little different than the cop that I thought he was going to be. And I'm like, no, like, like, yeah, it's fiction.
It's fiction.
Yeah. But I do think I stopped kind of caring. And I also didn't, I told myself that it was almost naive or ridiculous for me to ever think that anyone actually like I said, like the book would be published and it'd be on the shelf and a friend could pick it up and read it. So I almost told myself, no one's going to really read this anyway. Like no one's gonna. It doesn't like who are you to think that like So I think that kind of just gave myself like permission to just accept that people would say whatever they said. And I think writing Julian too, I always kind of feel like he was kind of like this um, somewhat avatar, but also kind of like this somewhat stand-up kind of comedian. He's just on a stage, stringing together what it is that's going to work for him and on the beat of the story. So the truth isn't important. I mean, to me, like it didn't, like I didn't feel any like kind of duty to tell the truth as far as like a real truth. It's more like about fictional truth, right? So once I got that in my mind, it was a lot easier. And same with the parents, right? So I was afraid like, oh, my parents are going to read this book. There's this character. He has these feelings about his parents and yada. And yeah, I would say that uh, the nice part is all those friends that I'm talking about and my parents, they've read the book and they don't they're like, "Ooh, I never said that. I never did that." And it's almost nice. It's kind of nice actually. It's like they're looking for I feel like it's like a game or looking for themselves more than they actually see it, which I feel was always the intent. I didn't want anyone to look at a character like, "Oh, that's this person," you know, just straight up. Um, but I think, like I said, they always say to write what you know, and I think that like I know what it feels like to be, like I said, like the beginning of the book starts and he's knocking on the door of a stranger, and he's feeling all this fear about it. And like I know what that fear feels like, to be the only black person in a place where it's okay, I'm in a white neighborhood, like people are obviously seeing me and noticing I'm here, and what does that mean? I know that feeling very well. Like, but I've never helped a friend get a fire pit. Like he
Right.
does in the book. I've never, so there's like little things like that where I just like I feel like I knew the places, and I knew the settings, and I knew the way people talked, and I knew the way that the world kind of felt, and I just utilized everything that I know to do that. But yeah. So at a certain point, I just accepted it, and I don't, yeah. And I also think it's funny. There's some parts of Julian that I hope people think are me that aren't. I guess like, yeah.
Well, and related to that, I mean, how do you think you've evolved writing the book, or what have you learned or discovered about yourself in that process?
I feel like this kind of sounds cheesy. I learned like that I'm pretty resilient when I want to be. I think that I gave Julian has that in the book, and so do his friends. In the sense they're not quitters necessarily. They may not
Right.
know exactly what they want, but they're not just like not gonna try. They're not gonna wake up and just decide they don't care to find it. They're gonna try to do something. And I think for myself too, I realized that um, I've had jobs that I haven't loved. I've had life experiences I haven't, but I've never like given up. And I think that what I realized about myself is that when I actually really care to do something like writing this book or being a writer, like I can sit down and I can work, like I can, um, that if I believe in something that I can give myself to it, completely. And so, I think that's how, it's like a nice thing. I think we were talking earlier about like someone being a writer, having a writer in a book. I didn't want Julian to be a writer. I wanted to be a musician, and someone who's focused on the arts. But I always told myself, like, what does Julian do? Like, he probably ends up writing a book, like someday. Like, what because he's searching for he's searching for the thing that he can give himself to, and I think that's kind of the joy that I felt in writing is that it's kind of something that I found that I can give myself to, and I can have the energy not to lie to myself. Like I don't, when I'm writing, like I've found, I feel like I've gotten better and better at being honest with myself about whether something's good or it needs work. And then I'm honest with myself about how much work that's going to take and knowing that I'm going to be disappointed. I'm probably going to be sad. That I might not be satisfied until, a month or two later, but just that, I guess that knowledge that if I keep pushing and keep working at it, like I can find it because I believe in it. So the option is to die or to keep on going. So I think that's how I've evolved. I just I've kind of I've realized that if I really do care about something, I can put myself into it. Just like music, which I think is nice. Music is kind of the same, but writing is nice because you don't have to have a band practice. You don't have to get schedules out. You don't have to listen to when the guitar player tells you you're playing too loud. You can just can be in all the control, within complete control, which is to whatever that means. But you can be in control, which I like.
Got it. Got it. All right, cool. So to the audience that's joining us, I'm gonna ask you to write your questions in the chat. We'll open it up in a few minutes. I have a few other questions, but go ahead and populate that, and then we'll address those one by one. Switching gears a little bit, Jeff, many of us are working on debut novels, and the publishing process is obviously something that is this kind of daunting thing to manage through. How did that work for you? How did the process of getting the book published unfold for you?
Well, kind of a long, winding road. So I started writing the book, I don't know, maybe 5 years before it came out. It's the first kind of novel I ever really worked on. First novel I ever completed. I probably felt the most confident in that first year that I wrote the book, as far as like, oh yeah, I'll do it, and then I'll find an agent, and then I'll publish it. And then it's like 4 years later, it's like, okay, like maybe I'm finally. And I did. I Initially I had a kind of a tough time finding an agent, so like I sent it in to some few people. One agent kind of took it up, but then we worked on revisions for it for about 6 7 months, where I would send them a revision, they'd write and they'd send back and say, oh no, you need to do more of this, you need to do more of that. And every time I would cry, because I would be convinced that this I would be convinced that
My
like
baby,
this
my
time,
baby.
yeah, like this time they're gonna take this one, they're gonna love it. And every time it was a no. So I mean almost for most of the like that was like during the pandemic, like that whole pandemic time was just like a fraught like me waiting, sending it to an agent, waiting to hear back, and then having to do more work, and that never worked out, right? So um, I eventually, in my sadness, messaged some of my writing group, because I graduated from Iowa, but the nice part is I still have the same writing group now. Writers that I can kind of talk to, and I can cry on their shoulder, really, even if it's just by text. And they were like, don't quit. Like, this is good enough. Send it to some more people. So I did send it out again, and then I eventually did find it. Well, two agents said they liked it. So I went from one person who was like, oh no, for a whole year, to two people like, yeah, let's do this. And then the next step was finding a publisher, which was also kind of took some time. So it was definitely a long process, that wasn't simple. And like I said, I think it's also the resolve I was talking about earlier. I just decided at some point that I just was like, whether I had to work other jobs or do other things, when it came to writing, like I was not going to give up on it. It's just like it's like the only choice you have, really. Some people it works out immediately. Like we know those people. It's like, oh yeah, I sent it in, everyone loved it, works out great. But most of us, you have to just toil and struggle until I don't know. Hopefully something something comes up. I would say it's just like the resolve. I think it's just and also accepting that people like what one person likes isn't what the next person's gonna like. I think like it's not like a monolith, you know, like agents are very uh some of them care about like how much something can sell, but most of them like do it out of love. So you know, it's just like you just got to find one person. Is always my thoughts. I just got to find one person who likes the book to be an agent. One person likes the book, hopefully to publish it. It's just like because there's yeah, it's just so varied you know, opinions and what people want. But as long as I just stayed true to myself and tried to keep on going, but it wasn't easy, that's for sure.
Any advice on writer's block, procrastination, like keeping that resolve? Were there any strategies that you deployed to work through those types of things?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think you just have to be like nice to yourself or kind. You have to like know when, I guess that is. You know, I guess like kind of being your own coach, right? So sometimes, or like I used to like have a trainer at the gym, you know. And I know some people don't like having trainers because they yell at you, but I kind of like it. I'm like, yeah, I like it. You know, they tell you, they don't tell you not to stay. They tell you, you know, to keep on going. I'm like, I'm not gonna, you know. But when it comes to writer's block, some days I just can't write. So I try to accept that. I usually still try to sit at the desk for an hour at least. I find that oftentimes, like, if I don't think I can write, that's usually when I'm not sitting down. Like, almost most of my negative writing thoughts are come from when I'm not sitting down to work. So sometimes the way to quiet, you know,
Yeah,
so sometimes I quiet that
right.
down by just sitting down and like opening the document and looking at it. And I tell myself, like, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't change anything. Like, you're just reading this document. And I find that that's one of my I think works for me the most on it almost on a daily basis is that before I sit down, I'm like, I can't do this. Like nothing's gonna happen. And then I you know, then I make myself sit there and look at, you know, just look at it and read it. And I start saying, well, I don't know about that. It's like, yeah, the reason I don't think I like this is because this character, I don't have enough of this character. I don't, you know, I don't know who they are. Like, how am I gonna figure that out? You know? And I find that also like those a lot of those negative thoughts are valid because your book probably, you know, I feel like my work usually isn't at the level that it needs to be at yet. So it's
Right.
natural for me to feel like it's like I feel like it's not because it isn't. And so I have to accept that and I have to ask myself, you know, um, yeah, like what you know, what do I need to get back into to liking this again or doing this more? And then also like on a practical level, I think I also I try to stop knowing what I'm going to do next. You know, one of those kind of classic things.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Ernest Hemingway. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I do try to keep up with that. Like you know, like tomorrow when I sit down to work, I know I'm going to be on page 105 and I'm going to start here. And like this character, she just needs to talk more because I don't know enough about her. So like, I'm just going to make her talk. So that's my plan tomorrow, you know. So I try to come up with a plan that's practical. I don't like. I know some people are like, I'm going to write 3,000 words today, and I
Right.
feel like I can't do that because if I'm not, I'm probably not going to, and it's just going to feel so horrible that the next day I'm going to, you know, feel like a failure. So I try to give myself like achievable goals, and sometimes that goal really is just like sit down and look at this, read a book of poetry, go on a walk. You know, I just try to, and I tell myself that's writing. You know, I try to keep my mind open to whatever it is that's stopping me or what's blocking me.
Terrific. We actually have a question that's related to this. So the question is, do you think attending the Iowa Writers Workshop was important to your career success? If not, what are the one or two key aspects that helped you get published?
Yeah, yeah, I would say it helped. You know, it's I think is if nothing else, like you just kind of meet. It's like a network. You know, you kind of meet people. You have a group. You know, I think editor or agents do like to hear it. You went to some school. You know, but at a practical level, you know, I went. That's I guess a hard question to answer. I mean, I know a lot of people in Iowa who have struggled to write books who still try to get published every you know as much as anybody you know they're still working on it, still working through it. So I think it wasn't like any kind of magical answer to anything. Um, but I do feel that it is nice to kind of it helps for getting attention, maybe foot in the door. You know, just like and then they like I said, I didn't when I tried to find an agent, I didn't really work through any Iowa connections. I just started querying people. Um, so yeah, I lost the question too, so I don't know what the What was the other part of it?
If not, like, no, I think you answered it.
Okay.
What are the one or two, it sounds like you don't think that Iowa necessarily was the critical linchpin in the publishing process. So the last part of the question was, if
Yeah.
not, what are the one or two aspects that helped you get published?
Yeah. I guess I kind of answered that.
Yeah,
But I do think, yeah, I do think you just gain confidence by having people tell you they like your stuff. I think that's like half of what Iowa did for me is like getting into it. It's like, oh, okay, like enough people think I'm good, I guess. So now I think it's like it was a confidence boost initially. I think
yeah.
that was a big part for me. And it set me up with a time to write and time to have other writers in the community, which I still feel like is the most important part of it. Is I have, which you can get in any program. You meet kind of like-minded people and friends, and writing doesn't feel like this lonely endeavor. It feels like it's kind of community project, which I appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my motivation in going through the Hopkins program was exactly that. It was, to work on craft, and importantly, though, to build a community and, have a sense of like-minded people, to read like a writer, those sorts of things. I mean, it was invaluable. So, but yeah, you still have to write, you still have to write
Yeah,
the,
definitely.
and just finishing up on this topic of publishing, just, like the one piece of advice, the most important thing that you think people should keep in mind when they're trying to make that transition to getting it published?
Um, I think one of them is it's like being honest with yourself. It's a
Mhm.
person lesson I learned. I think like I said, when I sent my book to that agent, and she's sent back notes every single time, and never took it. I think I probably felt I wasn't honest with myself about where I was at with the book. It probably wasn't in the best shape it could. I don't think it was in the best shape that it could have been in when I sent it in the first place. Um, and so I think one thing, I think it's like why workshop is good too, because a lot of the feedback you get is just like workshop. Some things you do don't work for people. Some things that you do, um, you feel good about it because you've done it, but no one else has that feeling. It's kind of this, I mean, it's lack of better words, kind of cold business situation where it's like you have to be really, I feel like I said, being really honest with myself about or where the work is, who else has work that's close to mine, um,
Yep.
whether or not, like any kind of defect or flaw that I saw in the book or something that didn't really work with me, almost always never worked with everyone else either, which I could also get in workshop. Like, oh yeah, I guess that really didn't work, did it? It's like it takes a long time and a lot of honesty, I think, to get to the point where you can say, okay, this book is the best that I can do, that I can make it, and here it is. Um, so I think it's kind of not getting ahead of yourself and really saying like, okay, like is this if no one else ever touched this book, no one else could ever edit it, nothing. Like, is this something I could be proud of that I would put out? I think a lot of people would probably say no, but you kind of want to keep doing it until you at least get to the point where someone's going to take it. And so I think that the real, well, for me, like the goal was always, or the goal eventually um, is to say, okay, like this is the best that I can do. This is the story that I want to tell. And it's done well. Um, if someone else wrote it, I would like it just as much. Um, I think a lot of publishers and agents also kind of they can see that. It's kind of their job to see that if they feel like something is at its peak or or if they can fix it. And usually, if they can fix it, it's not going to be huge structural things. It's those small things. So you got to get to the point in your own, I guess, for me, process where it's like, okay, like this is, um, I guess, a good product that I actually really believe in. um, because I think that's also begins to be what books like. It's kind of sad because eventually, like publishing, kind of feels like you're putting out like socks. Like I think it was a good kind of thing that like my agent told me one day. We were like working on the copy for the book that you read, um, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to say that because really it's about this, or Julian really feels this way. Like I don't know if the copy should say any. And the agent was like, listen, it's like at a certain point, this is a product. It's like a package of socks. It's like it doesn't necessarily matter how good the sock is. It doesn't matter, but if you can articulate, the great webbing here and the cool design there, and like it sounds really fun. Like that's, it's like that businessy side of it. I never really felt I still don't really feel comfortable with it, but I understand that it's like, um, at a certain point, it almost becomes cold and impersonable by design because it's a capitalist system in which people are trying to create products that they
Right.
feel can do something. And it kind of hurts, it feels very like the least artistic part of it, I think, is publishing. It's just, you just get to a point that almost feel kind of callous to it and say, okay, like this is the process and I'm one of many, this is how it's going to be after I'm gone too, and to some extent.
Were there any points of tension with Simon and Schuster or your agent in terms of things that they wanted to change or suggestions that you didn't agree with? How did you navigate that terrain?
Um, I think I did it the same way I do. Like I said, also, I think that's why workshops are so valuable, or feedback, knowing how to get feedback. Um, I found that sometimes, if my agent had a suggestion for something that wasn't working for him, it often wasn't the exact thing he pointed to. It was mostly like, okay, like he doesn't get this thing because I haven't said it well enough. So I would find, so I think it's like you learn how to take feedback in a way where you can address what it is that someone's saying, but not necessarily taking it wholesale. It's not, they may point to the problem after it's already been there, but what the fix is like kind of up to the writer. So I always kind of kept that in my mind. I try to be very clear working with agent and with the editor, like, okay, like you said, you like wanted this part, you didn't like that. It's like, but this is what I did to bridge that gap. And usually, for me, luckily, that all usually worked out. So they might have not liked something initially, but I found my own way to make it work without feeling like I was compromising the goal that I had or the vision for the book.
Got it. We have a question from Stephanie. What was the agent search like for you? What have you learned in that process?
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't easy. Um, I got a lot of no's. Like I've gotten really good at getting no's now. I feel like for the agent process, it's like I just because you do get so many people who are just like, no, thank you, this isn't for me, and it just hurts. Like it can hurt a lot. Just a little email. We're just like, no, I thank you for sending me the weight. Unfortunately, it's not for me. That's
Well, at
very
least you
difficult.
got a response. I mean, a lot, a lot of,
Well,
a lot of manuscripts get no response whatsoever.
yeah, if you send enough, it's like it's like a numbers game to some extent. Because um, but it wasn't like I said, it wasn't simple. I did try to. I think one goal is to not try to find people or agents who you like only because they've maybe published a successful book, and you're like, oh, they've published this successful book, they've done this successful book. Um, you kind of want to find someone who you feel like represents like really the kind of work that you do. And so it might be that you read a book by someone that you resonate with that's maybe not the top agent here or there, but that you feel like, okay, this person, I think this person I can vibe with in some way. They're gonna understand what I'm trying to do. And so that's kind of the process that I kind of took after a while and that's where I feel like I had more success as I had a better manuscript than I did in the beginning, but I also started like really trying to find people I feel like would be like-minded or who wanted to publish it, who were doing the same kind of books that I was trying to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Parting advice for those of us working through the first novel?
Um, I would say, I think the parting of like to keep on working. I feel like a lot of like it's really hard to keep to work on a book all the time, or to even just to think about a book, or to be in the space for it. But I would say to kind of find time to do that. So even those people maybe who aren't writing every day or who feel like they're at a writer's block or they don't know, to kind of find times in their day where they're telling themselves like I'm a writer. Like it's kind of like maybe it's like a mindfulness thing, but I feel like I spend a lot of my um, like I do some of my best writing when I'm jogging, and I'm telling myself before I start my jog, like okay, like we're not thinking about anything, but we're kind of thinking about the book back there somewhere. I'm just kind of being open to being a writer and what that means, and kind of going about the world in that way. I feel like opens up a lot of kind of breaks down a lot of writing barriers, at least for me. Um, and then um, also like honesty. I think it's just like really important to be honest with yourself as much as you can about um, where your work is, where your work's at, what you hope to achieve in the work, and also believing that you can be as good as anybody else can. You know, you can if you're writing, if you're like I said, like I don't know, like what will happen to the weight in the world, you know, in the end of the day or whatever. But for me, it's like I feel like I wrote a book that only I could write, and I wrote it the best way that I could, and I was honest with myself when it wasn't working. I think that sometimes we look for outside validation as far as saying like we want someone to say, "Oh, I really like this. It's really good," because we don't feel that way. But it's just I think it's just really important to be able to say like, okay, like this work is good because it's my vision. It's what I hope to achieve. Like I enjoy it. I like it. I think if we're honest with ourselves about the point where we say, okay, I love what I've done here. I like it. I wouldn't care if anyone else ever reads it. This is, you know, this is the best thing I can. You know, this is the vision that I had. It's almost like painting, right? Which is kind of nice that it's visual, but it's like the painting that you've created is what you've intended. You know, it's not like oh, it's good, but there's this little half here is this little sketch, and we'll paint it in later. It's like no, like you really have to um, kind of just sit there and and ask yourself what your vision is, what your goal is, and then be open to all the surprises and possibilities that can come with it.
Yeah. And I
So
would imagine the workshopping process really helps with that. I mean, how much did you workshop it before you started sending it out?
quite a bit. So even in Iowa, it was like the only thing I worked. It was mostly the only project I worked on, and I did a novel workshop eventually too. So I had 10 other people who all read my novel and gave me notes, and I did the same thing for them. So I started thinking about you know what I believed about writing. Well, if I didn't like something, I'd say, "Why don't I like this?" It's like so half the time it's because I didn't know how to do it myself, my own work. You know,
Mm.
but I do think, yeah, I workshopped it a lot. Like I just even what I do now, we're working on now. I still send it to friends, and I still like need that process. I need people to bounce off of. I need people to kind of open up, just, show me those blind spots I didn't see in the first place.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're coming up on time, and that was actually going to be my final question. Like, what is the next project? What are you excited about next?
Yeah. Um, so I'm currently working on like a crime novel that takes
Oh,
place in Chicago. Yeah. I
that's a good setting for a crime novel.
Yeah, it takes place in like the south side of Chicago and kind of like modern day. It's like it's fun because it's written in third person, so and it's like
Right.
five different POVs, so it's way different than the weight. Um, so it's also that same curve where, like I said, every day I feel like, oh no, like how am I going to do this? Um, because I've never done it before. I just know that you know, yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of serious about getting that done. I did sell it, so there's also like, okay, like someone expects it eventually. That does help. But yeah, it's a crime novel. I didn't know it was a crime novel until my editor told me though. He was like, so let me see, there's cops. There's this shooting here. There's this is like this is a crime novel, and I was like, really, crime novel, huh? Um, but yeah, it's fun. It's fun it's much more plot heavy, so I have to really think about um, whereas the weight was kind of this not stream of conscious, but it's just like this person through like the plot is the getting through the everydayness of life, whereas the book I'm working on now is very much like what happens after this guy gets shot. Like you've mentioned a knife here. Like what are you gonna do with that knife? Like it's just like really like really like well who did I've been asking myself recently, I'm like who did do this? Who did shoot this person? Like I don't know yet. So I have to know. Like, it's like a little so it's kind of fun to like kind of it's slightly genre kind of working with plot and other conventions I haven't really done worked with before. But it keeps me interested for sure.
Well, I know I speak for a lot of people in saying that we can't wait for the next one. It's been a fantastic conversation, Jeff. To those of you again on the call, The Wait, go out and get it if you haven't gotten it already. Fantastic read, super inspiring for those of us trying to do the same thing. So thank you for the time and for
Yeah.
a novel.
And
Well,
thank you,
yeah.
Torrence, for moderating. And thank you so much, Jeff. That was really wonderful.
Thank you. I had a great time. I appreciate it. It's great. Torrance is a great moderator. So I really like we keep
Great.
on chatting. So I
No, you make
appreciate
it very easy. You make it very-
Right. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.